Emma Carson wrapped the bandage around the worker's arm with careful movements. Her fingers were steady as she tied the knot. The blue-skinned alien winced but said nothing. Pain was common on Archon Station. Complaining about it was dangerous. "Keep it clean," Emma said quietly. "Come back in 3 days so I can check it." The worker nodded and hurried away. Emma watched him go, then turned back to her small medical station. The room was cramped and poorly lit. Medical supplies lined the metal shelves, most of them old or running low. She had learned to make do with very little. Archon Station orbited a dead moon in space. They had built it as a hub for their empire. Massive and cold, the station housed thousands of workers from dozens of conquered species. They mined minerals, processed fuel, and maintained the systems that kept the empire running. They ruled them all with casual cruelty. Emma had been on the station for 2 years. She came from Earth, though that felt like a lifetime ago. They had taken her ship along with 20 other humans. They found humans amusing, weak and small, easy to control, yet smart enough to do useful work. Perfect servants. She looked down at her hands. They were small, with thin fingers and neat nails. Scars crossed her palms from years of medical work. Calluses marked where she held her tools. They called them soft hands, useless hands, hands that could never fight or build or destroy. A sharp beep interrupted her thoughts. Emma looked at the comm panel on the wall. A message flashed in script. She had learned to read it quickly. "Report to the throne room, immediately." Emma's stomach tightened. Summons to the throne room were never good. She cleaned her hands, checked her medical bag, and left the clinic. The corridors of Archon Station stretched before her, dim and endless. Workers moved past her with heads down. Nobody made eye contact. That was safer. The throne room sat at the station's center. Emma had only been there twice before. Both times had been to treat injured guards. She walked through the heavy doors and stopped. The room was enormous. Pillars of dark metal rose to a high ceiling. Stolen treasures from conquered worlds lined the walls. At the far end, on a throne made of welded weapons and armor, sat Overlord. He was massive. His reptilian body filled the throne, scales gleaming like polished stone. His eyes were yellow and cold. Scars covered his arms and chest, each one a mark of battles won. He had conquered 6 systems before taking command of Archon Station. Everyone feared him. "The human healer," said. His voice rumbled through the room. "Approach." Emma walked forward. Her footsteps echoed on the metal floor. Guards lined the walls, weapons ready. Courtiers watched from the sides, their faces curious or bored. At the base of the throne, one of his personal guards lay on the floor. He clutched his leg. Blood seeped through his fingers, dark purple against his gray scales. "Fix him," commanded. Emma knelt beside the injured guard. She opened her medical bag and examined the wound. Deep cut, probably from a sparring accident. She cleaned it carefully, her movements quick and practiced. The guard hissed in pain but held still. Nobody moved without permission in his presence. As Emma worked, she felt eyes on her. She glanced up, leaned forward on his throne, watching her hands. "So small," he said, "so delicate." Emma said nothing. She focused on the wound, applying synthetic skin to seal it. Her fingers moved with practiced precision. Stood, he was even bigger standing, over 8 feet tall. He walked down from his throne and stopped beside Emma. She kept working, her heart pounding. Without warning, grabbed her wrist. His grip was like iron. He lifted her hand, turning it in the light. His claws scraped against her skin but didn't break it. "Look at this," he said to his court. "Human hands, so soft, so weak." He traced one claw over her palm, following the scars and calluses. "These are not the hands of a warrior, not the hands of a builder. What can such pathetic things create? What can they destroy?" Laughter rippled through the throne room. The courtiers jeered, the guards smiled. Emma kept her eyes down. "Nothing," continued. "They can create nothing, they can destroy nothing. These are servant hands, slave hands." He squeezed. Emma felt her bones grind together but didn't cry out. "Your entire species is like these hands, soft, fragile, useless for anything but serving your betters." He released her suddenly. Emma pulled her hand back and returned to treating the guard. She finished quickly, packing her tools with steady movements. The guard tested his leg and nodded his thanks. "You may go," said, waving his hand dismissively. "Run back to your little clinic, do your little tasks, remember what you are." Emma stood, she bowed her head and walked toward the exit. The jeers followed her. The laughter echoed, she didn't look back. The corridors felt colder after the throne room. Emma walked through them in a daze, her wrist aching where it grabbed it. She passed workers and guards, keeping her face blank. Inside, something burned. She reached the lower levels where the human workers lived. Their quarters were cramped, 20 people sharing a space meant for 10. Emma found Henderson sitting on his bunk, working on a broken data pad. Was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and hands marked by years of engineering work. He had been a military contractor on Earth before they took him. Now he maintained the station's secondary systems, the ones that considered beneath their attention. "Emma," he said, looking up, "you look troubled." Emma sat beside him. She held up her wrist, already bruising purple. "Summoned me to fix his guard. He grabbed my hand, called it soft, called it useless." She was quiet for a moment. "He called all of us useless." "Set down the data pad. He said that." Him and his whole court, they laughed. Emma looked at her hands, the same hands that had sutured wounds, delivered bobbies, saved lives. "You know engineering, you know systems." "I do." "How hard would it be to sabotage this station?" Went very still. He looked around, checking if anyone was listening. The other humans were far enough away, lost in their own exhaustion. "That's a dangerous question," he said quietly. "I know." Studied her face. Then he looked at her hands, those gentle hands with their healer's scars. A sad smile crossed his face. "With these systems," he said, "for someone who understands biology as well as you do, easier than you'd think." He paused, but Emma, it would take time, planning, help from others. "How much time?" "Weeks, maybe a month." Emma nodded slowly. She flexed her fingers, feeling the ache in her wrist. In her mind, she heard laughter. She heard the jeers of his court. She thought about 2 years of servitude, of watching people suffer, of being called useless. "A month," she repeated. "That's acceptable." His eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Completely." "Emma, if we fail, if they catch us, they'll kill everyone. Not just us, everyone." "I know," Emma met his gaze. "But if we do nothing, this continues forever. We live as slaves, we die as slaves. Our soft, useless hands never change anything." Was quiet for a long time. Then he laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "You know what they don't understand about humans." "What?" "We're from Earth. We survived ice ages, plagues, predators that could tear us apart. We built civilization in the harshest conditions in the galaxy." He looked at his own hands. "They think gentle means weak. They don't know the difference." Emma felt something settle in her chest. A decision made, a path chosen. "Can you get schematics of the life support systems?" she asked. "I maintain them. I have full access." "Good, I'll need 3 weeks. Can you be ready by then?" Henderson, former military engineer, looked at the young woman beside Emma's. Earliest memory of Earth was the sound of thunder. She was 5 years old, standing at the window of her family's apartment in Seattle. Rain hammered against the glass like bullets. Lightning split the sky. Her mother pulled her away from the window, laughing at her daughter's fascination. "It's just weather, sweetheart," her mother had said. "Earth weather, nothing to be afraid of." Emma thought about that now as she walked through the lower levels of Archon Station. Just weather. She had learned later that most inhabited planets in the galaxy didn't have weather like Earth. Their climates were stable, gentle, predictable. No violent storms, no killing freezes, no scorching heat waves. Earth had all of those things, and humans had learned to live through them. She stopped at a junction in the corridor. A group of workers huddled near a broken vent, trying to stay warm. Emma recognized a few faces. She had treated most of them at one point or another. "How's the arm, Vex?" she asked a thin alien with gray skin. The alien, from a world 3 systems away, flexed his arm. "Better. The pain is gone. You have good hands." Emma smiled slightly. "Glad to hear it." She paused. "Vex, do you know who manages the water recycling on this level?" "Daniel Torres, the human. Why?" "Just curious, thank you." She moved on, filing the information away. Daniel Torres. She had met him once briefly. A mechanic who kept the station's life support running. She would need to talk to him soon. The days fell into a pattern. Emma treated the sick and injured, moving through the station's lower levels with her medical bag. But now she did more than heal. She observed, she asked questions, she learned. The head designed Archon Station for efficiency, not comfort. Environmental systems were basic. Air recyclers, water purifiers, temperature controls. All of it ran on automated systems that the barely monitored. Why would they? The station had run smoothly for decades. That complacency was useful. Emma found Daniel Torres in a maintenance shaft on level 7. He was wedged into a narrow space, working on a coolant line. Tools floated around him in the low-gravity section. "Daniel Torres," Emma called. A head emerged from the shaft. Daniel was young, maybe 30, with dark hair and oil-stained hands. He looked at Emma with curiosity. "That's me. You're the medic, right, Emma?" "Right, can we talk?" Daniel pulled himself out of the shaft and grabbed a handhold. "About what?" Emma glanced around. They were alone. About making changes to the environmental systems, small changes that wouldn't be noticed. Daniel's expression went carefully blank. "That's a strange thing for a medic to ask about." "I know, but I'm asking anyway." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Daniel nodded toward a storage room. They went inside and sealed the door. "You're talking about sabotage?" Daniel said quietly. "I'm talking about adjustments, ones that would make certain people uncomfortable without being obviously wrong." Emma met his eyes. "Henderson said you were smart. He said I could trust you." "Is involved in this?" "Yes." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "What kind of adjustments?" Emma explained. Small changes to oxygen levels, slight variations in temperature, nothing that would harm anyone but enough to affect the. They had evolved on a world with stable conditions. Their bodies weren't adaptable like human bodies. "It would make them tired," Emma said. "Irritable, unfocused, like having a mild flu all the time, but the sensors wouldn't show anything wrong because technically nothing would be wrong, just different." Daniel listened. Then he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "You know what? I've been maintaining these systems for a year. Nobody checks my work. Nobody even talks to me except to complain when something breaks." He looked at his oil-stained hands. "Yeah, I can make adjustments." Emma felt relief wash through her. "Thank you." "When?" "Soon, I'll let you know." She left the maintenance shaft and continued her rounds. 3 more people to recruit. Kate Morgan in communications, Lee in the loading docks, and an alien named Click 7 who worked in waste processing. Kate was the easiest. Emma found her in the communications hub, a small room filled with monitors and transmission equipment. Kate was slim and quick, with red hair tied back and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I know why you're here," Kate said before Emma could speak. "Told me you might come by." Emma blinked. He did. "We've been talking, a few of us humans, about how long we can stand this." Kate glanced at the monitors, then back to Emma. "I can help. I can reroute signals, delay security alerts, make it look like system glitches. They think I'm just a technician. They have no idea how much control I actually have." Emma added her to the network. Then Lee, a dock worker with broad shoulders and quiet anger in his eyes. He could control shipments, move supplies, create confusion when needed. Click 7 was different. He wasn't human. The alien worked in the lowest level of the station, managing waste recycling. His species, had been conquered by the decades ago. His family had died in the initial invasion. Emma found him in the waste processing center. The smell was terrible, but Click 7 didn't seem to notice. His compound eyes focused on Emma as she approached. "Human healer," he buzzed. "Why are you here?" "I need help," Emma said simply. "I'm planning something that will hurt the." Click 7's antennae twitched. "Revenge." "Justice." "What's the difference?" Emma thought about that. Revenge is about making them suffer. Justice is about making them stop. She paused. "I'm not asking you to kill anyone. I'm asking you to help free everyone." Click 7 was silent for a long time. Then he clicked his mandibles together, a sound Emma had learned meant agreement. "I will help. Tell me what you need." The network was forming. 5 people, 5 different positions, all with access to systems they ignored. Emma felt the plan taking shape in her mind. But then came the summons, another call to the throne room. Emma went, her heart steady. She had been summoned 3 times now in 2 weeks, each time to treat minor injuries or examine himself. The Overlord seemed to enjoy having her nearby, another human to mock. This time a slave had collapsed during a public punishment. The alien lay on the floor, barely breathing. Emma rushed forward and started treatment immediately. Broken ribs, internal bleeding. She worked fast, her hands steady. Above her, watched from his throne. Such dedication, he said. You waste your skills on slaves. Why not use those gentle hands for something important? Emma didn't answer. She focused on stopping the bleeding. I have a proposition, continued. Become my personal physician. You would have better quarters, better food, better everything. All you would have to do is serve me. Emma finished stabilizing the slave. She looked up at the Overlord. I'm honored, she said, keeping her voice neutral. I would be happy to serve. Smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Excellent, you start tomorrow. He stood and walked down to her. Once again, he grabbed her hand, lifting it for his court to see. Look at these hands, so soft, so weak. These are healing hands, nothing more. They could never build anything, never break anything, never threaten anyone. The court laughed on cue. Emma kept her expression blank. Healing hands, repeated, useless for anything else but useful enough to keep me healthy. He released her hand with a dismissive gesture. You're dismissed. Emma bowed and left. In the corridor she passed, she whispered as she walked by, 3 weeks, can you be ready? Nodded slightly, yes. That night Emma sat alone in the medical bay. She looked at her hands in the dim light. The scars were visible white lines against her skin. Each one told a story. This scar from a chemical burn, treating a patient in a makeshift clinic during the food riots of 2184. This one from a broken beaker when the ship she served on lost gravity during an attack. This callus from holding surgical tools for 12 hours straight, saving lives in a crisis. These hands had done more than could imagine, but he saw only weakness, he saw only softness. Emma remembered Earth. She remembered learning about human history in school, the ice ages that should have killed humanity but didn't, the plagues that decimated populations but never destroyed them, the wars, famines, disasters. Humanity survived all of it. They survived because they were adaptable, because they could endure conditions that would kill most species, because gentle didn't mean weak. They came from a gentle world. Their evolution had been easy, stable, predictable. They had never faced the challenges that forged humanity. They thought strength meant size and claws and armor. They were wrong. Emma closed her medical bag and stood. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, she would show what evolution created. She would show him what gentle hands could do when pushed too far. She thought about her new position as his personal physician. Perfect. She would have access to him every day. She could monitor his health closely. She could make adjustments to his diet, his supplements, his environment. Small adjustments, harmless adjustments, nothing that would show up on scans. But she knew biology, she knew physiology, and she knew exactly how to make someone uncomfortable without it being obviously wrong. Emma smiled in the darkness, had made a mistake today. He had given her exactly what Emma's new quarters were larger than her old ones. Still small by standards, but compared to the cramped spaces she had shared with 20 other humans, it felt luxurious. A real bed, a private bathroom, a small desk. She hated it. Every comfort was a reminder of the price. She was physician now. She had to attend him twice daily, checking his health, administering supplements, ensuring his physical perfection. He treated her like a pet, useful but beneath notice. That was exactly what she needed. On her 3rd day in the new position, Emma made her first adjustment, sat on his throne reviewing reports from his commanders. Emma approached with a tray of supplements. Your daily vitamins, Overlord, she said quietly. Barely looked at her, leave them. Emma set the tray down and bowed. She left the throne room with careful steps. None of the guards noticed that one of the supplements was slightly different, not poison, nothing that would harm him, just a compound that would affect his sleep patterns, make his rest less deep, less refreshing. He would wake up tired, a little more tired each day. Meanwhile, Daniel worked his magic with the environmental systems. The changes were microscopic, an increase in oxygen levels by 0.5%, a rise in temperature by 1 degree, adjustments to the lighting spectrum. For humans, the changes were barely noticeable. Actually, they were slightly more comfortable than before. But for whose evolution had occurred in stable, controlled conditions, the shifts were disorienting. Within a week, the guards were moving slower. They complained of headaches. Their reaction times dropped, but medical scans showed nothing wrong. Blood work was normal. Brain function was normal. The doctors were confused. Summoned Emma more frequently. I feel off, he told her during one examination. Check everything. Emma's hands moved over him with gentle precision. She checked his heart rate, his breathing, his muscle responses. "Your readings are perfect, Overlord. Perhaps you need more rest." "I rest plenty," he growled, but his eyes were tired, his movements less sharp than before. "Stress can affect sleep quality," Emma suggested. "I can adjust your supplements to help." She did adjust them. She added compounds that would make him slightly more irritable, nothing dangerous, just enough to fray his temper, to make him snap at his subordinates, to create tension in his court. The throne room became an uncomfortable place. Guards avoided being stationed there when possible. The lighting gave them headaches. The air felt wrong somehow. They couldn't explain it, but they didn't like it. Emma liked it fine. She walked through the throne room twice a day, checking on, and felt nothing. Her body, adapted to Earth's harsh conditions, barely registered the changes. Kate worked her own sabotage in communications. She rerouted messages to create small delays. A security alert would arrive 30 seconds late. A maintenance request would get sent to the wrong department. Nothing obvious enough to be called a malfunction, but enough to create inefficiency. The station's operations began to slow, not dramatically but noticeably. Shipments arrived late. Reports were delayed. Systems that should have been repaired immediately took days to fix. They blamed each other. They blamed the workers. They never suspected sabotage. Why would they? Everything still functioned, just not quite as smoothly as before. In the loading docks added to the chaos. He misrouted supplies, put critical parts in the wrong storage areas, created inventory errors that took time to fix. They grew frustrated, but they saw it as incompetence, not malice. Click 7's contribution was more subtle. He adjusted the waste processing to release trace amounts of harmless bacteria into the ventilation system. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that would make anyone sick. But the bacteria were from his, and they created a faint smell that found unpleasant. The humans didn't notice it. Click 7's species didn't notice it. But they wrinkled their noses and complained that something smelled wrong. Everything was wrong, but nothing was wrong. That was the beauty of it. Emma continued her daily routine. She treated patients in the medical bay. She attended to twice a day. She moved through the station with her gentle hands and quiet demeanor, invisible and unthreatening. During her examinations she began talking to him. At first, he ignored her. But as the weeks wore on and his discomfort grew, he became more receptive to conversation. Anything to distract from the vague wrongness he couldn't identify. "Tell me about Earth," he said one day, almost bored. Emma cleaned her medical tools, her movements unhurried. "What would you like to know?" "Why is it called a—" "Because it's harsh. The temperature can swing 40 degrees in a single day. We have storms that can level buildings, earthquakes that split the ground, volcanoes that blacken the sky." Laughed, though it sounded tired, "and yet humans survived." "We did more than survive. We thrived." Emma looked at him. "We learned to read the weather, to predict the dangers, to build shelters that could withstand anything nature threw at us." "Impressive for primitives." Emma didn't react to the insult. "We also have diseases, viruses that killed millions before we learned to fight them, bacteria that evolved as fast as we did, parasites that could take over our bodies." "Sounds like a nightmare." "It was home." Emma finished cleaning her tools. "But it taught us things, how to adapt, how to survive in impossible conditions, how to keep going when everything seemed hopeless." Waved his hand dismissively. "Ancient history, you're civilized now, conquered but civilized." Emma bowed her head. "Yes, Overlord." But inside she smiled. He still didn't understand. He thought civilization meant weakness. He thought conquered meant broken. He was about to learn differently. 2 weeks into the plan, a guard struck a human child in the market. The child, a girl named Amy, had bumped into the guard while running. It was an accident. But the guard, already irritable from the environmental changes and lack of sleep, lashed out. He hit Amy hard enough to knock her down. She cried out and clutched her arm. Emma was nearby, treating a worker. She heard the cry and ran. Amy lay on the ground, tears streaming down her face. Her arm bent at an unnatural angle. "Move aside," Emma said to the crowd gathering around. She knelt beside Amy. "It's okay, sweetheart, I'm here, I'm going to help." Amy looked up at her with terrified eyes. "It hurts." "I know, but I'm going to make it better." Emma opened her medical bag. Her hands moved with practiced calm, checking the brake, preparing a temporary splint. The guard who had hit Amy stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. Others gathered to watch. Someone had already summoned. The Overlord arrived as Emma was setting the bone. Amy whimpered, but Emma's gentle hands worked quickly. She talked softly to the girl, distracting her from the pain. "You're very brave," Emma said. "Did you know that bones are amazing? They can break and then grow back even stronger than before." "Really?" Amy sniffled. "Really, your body knows how to heal itself. It just needs a little help." Emma finished the splint and tied it carefully. "There, see, all done." Watched from above, his expression amused. Human bones must be as weak as their spirits if they break from such a small blow. Emma looked up at him. For the first time since becoming his physician, she didn't immediately lower her gaze. She met his eyes directly. Something in her look made pause. It wasn't fear or submission. It was calculation, assessment, like a doctor examining a particularly interesting case. Then Emma lowered her eyes and returned to comforting Amy. "You'll heal perfectly," she told the girl. "I promise." The crowd dispersed, returned to his throne room, troubled in a way he couldn't name. That look in Emma's eyes. It had been there and gone in an instant, but it had been real. For the first time, he wondered if he had missed something. That night, Emma met with her network in a maintenance tunnel on level 9. All 5 of them gathered in the darkness, their faces grim. The guard who hit Amy said, "I want to break his neck." "No," Emma said firmly. "That's not the plan. Violence makes us the enemy. It justifies their cruelty. We're not doing this for revenge. We're doing it for freedom." "So what do we do?" Kate asked. Emma looked at each of them in turn. "We continue. Everything is working. They are slower, more irritable, less focused. Their systems are failing bit by bit. In 1 more week, we'll be ready for the final phase." "And what's that?" Daniel asked. "We take the station, not with weapons, not with violence, with control." Emma held up her hands, the same gentle hands had mocked so many times. "We've been making them uncomfortable, now we make them helpless." Smiled the life support. "Everything, life support, communications, security, docking, all of it goes down at once, or rather it all comes under our control." Emma's voice was steady. "Though we'll have a choice, surrender peacefully or suffocate in the dark." "They'll fight," Click7 buzzed. "They'll try," Emma agreed. "But they'll be fighting in conditions they can't handle. Reduced oxygen, failing lights, locked doors. Meanwhile, we'll be fine. Earth didn't prepare us to live in comfort. It prepared us to survive." The group was silent, absorbing the plan. 1 week, Emma said. "Make your preparations, check everything 3 times. When we move, we have to be perfect." They dispersed quietly. Emma returned to her quarters, her mind racing through the details. 1,000 things could go wrong, but they had planned for every contingency they could imagine. As she lay in her comfortable bed, Emma thought about Amy's arm. The bone had broken cleanly. It would heal. Bones always did, given time and proper care. Empire was like a broken bone. It seemed solid, but it was fractured at its core, built on cruelty and conquest, maintained by fear. Emma's gentle hands were going to help it heal by breaking it completely first. The day arrived with no fanfare. Emma woke in her quarters at the normal time. She dressed in her usual medical clothes. She ate a small breakfast. To any observer, it was just another day on Archon Station. But her hands shook slightly as she tied her shoes. Today, everything changed. She checked her medical bag 3 times. Inside, among the normal supplies, she had hidden one item, a hypo-injector filled with a paralytic compound. It was derived from Earth biology, from a plant that grew in tropical regions. The doctors had never seen anything like it. Their databases had no record of it. That ignorance would be their downfall. Emma left her quarters and walked to the throne room. The corridors were quiet. The night shift had just ended and the day shift was beginning. The timing was deliberate. In the transition between shifts, there was always confusion, always opportunity. She passed Kate in the hallway. Kate was carrying a data pad, looking like any other technician heading to work. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Kate nodded slightly. It was time. Emma entered the throne room, sat on his throne, looking worse than she had ever seen him. His scales were dull. His eyes were bloodshot. 3 weeks of poor sleep, environmental stress, and carefully administered supplements had taken their toll. Finally, he growled when he saw her, "I feel terrible, fix it." Emma bowed. Of course, Overlord, let me examine you. She approached the throne with her medical bag. The guards watched her with tired eyes. They had stopped paying attention to the gentle human healer weeks ago. She was harmless, useful but harmless. Emma checked vital signs, elevated heart rate, higher blood pressure than normal, signs of stress and exhaustion. You need rest, she said. I have been resting, snapped. Nothing helps, the air feels wrong, the light gives me headaches, I can't sleep properly. He grabbed the armrest of his throne, his claws scraping metal. Everything on this station is falling apart. Perhaps I can give you something to help, Emma suggested. She reached into her medical bag. At that exact moment, throughout Archon Station, 5 people acted simultaneously. Daniel entered a command into the environmental system controls. The life support began to shift. Oxygen levels started dropping, not fast, not enough to cause immediate panic, but enough to be noticed. Kate triggered a series of prepared commands in the communications hub. Security alerts stopped transmitting. Door controls switched to manual override. The automated systems that ran the station went silent. Locked down the loading docks. No ships could launch, no cargo could move, everything was sealed. Click 7 shut down the waste processing and water recycling. The station's basic services ground to a halt. And in the main power control room, rerouted all system access to a single terminal, one that only he could operate. In the throne room, alarm klaxons began to wail. Red lights flashed, stood abruptly, his exhaustion forgotten in sudden alarm. What's happening? He demanded. Guards rushed to the communication panels. Systems failure, Overlord. Multiple systems are down. Fix it. We can't access the controls. Everything's locked out. Roared in fury, he turned to his commanders. Find out who did this. I want them executed. Emma stood quietly by the throne, her medical bag in hand, noticed her and his eyes narrowed. Do you know anything about this? Me, Overlord? Emma kept her voice calm. I'm just a healer. A human healer. Where are your people? Are they behind this? Before Emma could answer, the throne room doors burst open. A guard stumbled in, breathing hard. Overlord, the humans in the lower levels have sealed themselves in. They've taken control of the environmental systems. His expression turned deadly. He moved toward Emma with terrifying speed. You knew about this. I did, Emma said. Grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off the ground. His grip was crushing. Fix it. Order them to stop or I'll break your neck. Emma couldn't breathe. Her vision started to blur, but she had expected this. She had prepared for it. Her hand was already in her medical bag. Her fingers closed around the hypo-injector. With the last of her strength, she drove it into his arm and pressed the trigger. The Overlord roared and threw her. Emma hit the floor hard, gasping for air. She rolled away, clutching her throat. Looked at the injector embedded in his arm. He yanked it out and stared at it. What did you do? Paralytic, Emma wheezed. Fast-acting, Earth-derived. You poisoned me, advanced on her, murder in his eyes, but his steps were unsteady, his legs trembled. I'll tear you apart. You can try. Emma stood slowly, still struggling to breathe. But you have about 30 seconds before you can't move at all. Lunged at her. His massive form crashed forward, claws extended, but his muscles were already failing. He collapsed halfway to Emma, his body hitting the floor like a fallen statue. The guards rushed forward. Emma raised her hands. Don't, he's alive. The paralytic will wear off in about 6 hours. He's not in danger. You attacked the Overlord? A guard drew his weapon. Lower your weapons, a new voice said. Everyone turned. Henderson stood in the doorway, flanked by a dozen humans carrying improvised weapons. Behind them, more workers appeared. Humans, all the enslaved species of Archon Station. The station is ours, said calmly. We control life support, communications, power, everything. You have a choice. Stand down peacefully or we start reducing oxygen levels. The guards looked at each other uncertainly. They were already exhausted from weeks of environmental stress. Their Overlord lay paralyzed on the floor. The humans, the weak servants, had somehow taken control. You're bluffing, one guard said. Smiled, it wasn't a friendly expression. Try me. Emma walked to where lay. She knelt beside him. His eyes could still move, and they burned with hatred. You're wondering how, Emma said quietly, how weak, gentle humans could do this. She held up her hands. You mocked these hands, called them soft, called them useless. Couldn't speak, but his eyes promised death. Let me tell you about these hands, Emma continued. This scar is from performing surgery in a moving vehicle while under attack. This one is from delivering a baby during a planetary evacuation. This callus is from holding surgical tools for 16 hours straight, saving lives while bombs fell outside. She leaned closer. These hands have been poisoning you for 3 weeks. Nothing lethal, nothing you could detect. Just compounds that disrupted your sleep, made you irritable, threw off your system. Your doctors couldn't find anything wrong because there was nothing wrong, just tiny changes, adjustments, the kind of learns to make when survival means adapting to harsh conditions. Emma stood and addressed the guards. You've been living in an environment optimized for human comfort for weeks now. You felt terrible because your bodies aren't built for adaptation. You evolved on a gentle world where everything stayed the same. We evolved on Earth where nothing stayed the same, where survival meant handling temperature swings, disease, predators, disasters. She walked to his throne, the massive seat of welded weapons and stolen treasures. You told me these hands could never build anything, could never destroy anything. Emma placed her hands on the throne. You were wrong. Using leverage and technique learned from years of moving patience, Emma pushed. The throne teetered. She pushed harder. With a sound like thunder, the throne toppled and crashed to the floor. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The Overlord's throne, his symbol of power, lay on its side. Broken. Emma turned to the guards. Put down your weapons, this is over. One by one, they were outnumbered, exhausted, and their leader was paralyzed. The fight had gone out of them. Throughout Archon Station, the liberation spread. Kate broadcast the news from the communications hub. Archon Station is free, the occupation is ended, any who surrenders will be treated humanely, any who resist will be dealt with. Daniel maintained careful control of the life support. He kept conditions at levels comfortable for humans but uncomfortable for, not dangerous but not pleasant. It was psychological warfare and it worked. Opened the loading docks selectively, allowing supply ships to leave but preventing any military vessels from entering. The station was locked down. Click 7 coordinated with other aliens, spreading the word. After decades of occupation, they were free. The response was overwhelming. Workers emerged from the lower levels, ready to defend their freedom. Emma stood in the throne room, looking its paralyzed form. The drug would wear off eventually. He would face trial for his crimes. But for now, he could only watch as his empire crumbled around him. This is what gentle hands can do, Emma said softly. When pushed too far, when fighting for something that matters, we don't become cruel like you. We become strategic. We use our minds. We use our knowledge. We use the very traits you mocked. Approached her. The station is secure. All forces have surrendered. Casualties are minimal, just some injuries during the initial confusion. Good. Emma looked at her bruised throat and a reflective surface. It would heal. Get the medical teams organized. Treat the wounded. Everyone, even the... You want us to help them. Yes, because we're not them. We don't let people suffer just because we can. Emma met his eyes. That's the difference between conquerors and liberators. The medical bay had never been busier. Emma moved between beds, checking patients, adjusting treatments, offering comfort. Her hands, those gentle hands, worked without pause. In one bed lay a guard who had been injured during the initial confusion. A broken leg. Emma had said it herself, her movements precise and professional. The guard watched her with confused eyes. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. Emma looked at him while changing his bandage. "Because you're injured, that's all that matters to me." "But I'm your enemy." "You were my oppressor, that's different from being my enemy, and now you're just a patient." She finished the bandage. "Rest, the bone will heal in a few weeks." The guard said nothing more, but his expression was troubled. Around him, others received the same treatment. Care without cruelty. Medicine without malice. It confused them more than anything. 3 days had passed since the liberation. Archon Station was stabilizing under new management. A temporary council had formed, made up of representatives from different species. They met in what used to be throne room. The broken throne still lay on its side. Nobody had moved it. It served as a reminder. Kate worked around the clock in communications, sending and receiving messages from across the galaxy. News of the liberation had spread faster than anyone expected. Other stations were asking questions. Other enslaved populations were getting ideas. The Empire was scrambling to respond. Their official stance was that Archon Station had experienced a terrorist attack. They demanded immediate surrender and threatened military action. The Council's response was simple: come and try. They knew something that didn't. Most of the Empire's military strength was spread across conquered territories, maintaining control through fear. They didn't have the resources for a prolonged siege, and every day they waited, more stories leaked out about what had really happened. A human woman, gentle hands, strategic brilliance, nonviolent resistance. The story was spreading, and it was changing how people thought about both humans and the Empire. Emma barely had time to think about the larger implications. She was too busy keeping people alive. The station's medical facilities had been designed for minor injuries and basic care. Now they were treating the psychological trauma of liberation, the physical injuries from decades of harsh labor, and the ongoing health issues that came from years of poor nutrition and overcrowding. She worked 18-hour days, brought her food and made her eat. "You need rest," he told her. "I'll rest when everyone is stable." "Emma, you're going to collapse." "Then I'll treat myself and get back to work." Laughed despite himself. "You're insane." "I prefer dedicated." On the fourth day was brought before the council for a preliminary hearing. The paralytic had worn off completely. He stood in chains, his massive form diminished somehow. Without his throne, without his power, he looked smaller. Emma was called to testify. She stood before the council and described his crimes with clinical precision. No emotion, just facts. The slaves he had killed, the families he had separated, the cruelties he had inflicted for entertainment. Listened with a stone face. When Emma finished, he spoke for the first time since his capture. "You think you've won?" he said, his voice still carrying authority despite the chains. "You think this changes anything? The Empire will come. They will crush this pathetic rebellion. And you, human, you will die slowly for what you've done." Emma met his gaze calmly. Maybe the Empire will retake this station. Maybe I will die." She paused. "But you've already lost, Overlord. You lost the moment you underestimated us. And that mistake, that fundamental error in judgment, is spreading through your Empire right now." "What are you talking about?" Every slave in every facility is hearing this story. They're learning that strength doesn't just come from size or weapons. They're learning that their oppressors can be beaten. They're learning that gentle doesn't mean weak. Emma smiled slightly. "You wanted to break our spirits. Instead, you showed us we could break your throne." Said nothing, but something in his eyes suggested he understood. The council sentenced him to life imprisonment on a rehabilitation colony. Not death, not torture. Imprisonment with the possibility of eventual freedom if he showed genuine remorse. He was stunned. "You're not going to kill me." "No," the council chairperson said. "We're not like you. We believe in justice, not revenge. You'll have time to think about that difference." As was led away, he looked back at Emma one last time. She raised her hand in a small wave, those gentle hands that had toppled his empire. A week after liberation, ships began arriving. Not warships, but independent vessels, traders, journalists, representatives from other species who wanted to see the freed station for themselves. One ship carried a delegation from Earth. Emma was surprised to learn that news had reached her home planet. A woman in a formal uniform approached her in the landing bay. "Dr. Emma Carson." "I'm not a doctor, just a medic." "You're a hero. Earth sent us to offer support. Medical supplies, food, engineers to help repair the station." The woman smiled. "Also, your family wants you to know they're proud of you." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. She hadn't cried once during the entire ordeal, but the thought of her family broke through her composure. "Thank you." The supplies from Earth helped enormously. Emma finally had the equipment she needed. The medical bay expanded. More healers arrived, allowing Emma to actually rest. Found her in her quarters on the 10th day, sleeping at her desk. He woke her gently. "Emma, there's someone here to see you." She blinked awake. "Who?" "Galactic Media. They want to interview you. The story is spreading to species that aren't even in contact with the Empire. Everyone wants to know about the human who broke the Overlord's throne." Emma rubbed her face. "I don't want to be famous. I just wanted people to be free." "I know, but you're the symbol now, the face of the resistance. Other humans in space are organizing. They're calling themselves the Gentle Hands Movement." Emma groaned. That's a terrible name. Terrible or not, it's catching on. You started something, Emma. You can't put that back in the box. The interview happened in the old throne room. Journalists from a dozen species crowded in with cameras and recording equipment. Emma stood beside the toppled throne, still in her medical clothes, looking tired and small. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. They asked about the plan. She explained it simply, giving credit to her entire team. She talked about engineering, Daniel's environmental expertise, Kate's communications work, logistics, and Click7's courage. They asked about Earth. She described it honestly. A beautiful, terrible world that made its children strong through hardship. They asked about the paralytic compound. She explained the biology, the chemistry, how Earth's harsh environment had created countless unique substances that the galaxy had never seen. Isn't that dangerous? One journalist asked. If humans have access to so many unknown compounds. Emma smiled slightly. Only if we choose to use them as weapons. We prefer to use them as medicine. The same knowledge that let me paralyze also lets me save lives. It's about choice, about what we do with our advantages. And what do humans want? Another journalist asked. What's the end game here? Freedom for everyone, not just humans, but all the enslaved species in the Empire. We want a galaxy where strength doesn't give you the right to oppress others, where different doesn't mean lesser, where gentle hands can heal without fear of being called weak. The interview was broadcast across multiple systems. The response was overwhelming. More stations began reporting unrest, workers organizing, quiet resistance movements forming. The Empire tried to crack down, but the harder they pushed, the more resistance grew. Archon Station became a symbol, the free station, the place where the impossible happened. Emma tried to stay out of the spotlight after that initial interview. She returned to her work in medical, treating patients, training new healers, building a healthcare system that served everyone equally. But people sought her out, other humans who had heard the story, aliens who wanted to learn from her, even some who were questioning their empire's foundation. One day, a young approached her in the medical bay. She was small for her species, barely 6 feet tall, with bright green scales. Dr. Carson. Just Emma, and you are. I was a student on I came here to understand what happened. The young hesitated. My teachers say you're a terrorist, that you used poisons to attack the Overlord. And what do you think? Looked around the medical bay, at the humans and aliens working together, at the patients being treated without discrimination, at Emma's gentle hands. I think my teachers are wrong. I think you're a healer who fought back when pushed too far. I think the Empire is built on lies. She met Emma's eyes. I want to help. I want to learn from you. I want to be part of something better than what I grew up with. Emma studied the young. She saw genuine hope there, genuine desire for change. Can you handle blood? Emma asked. Yes. Can you work long hours without complaining? I can try. Can you treat someone who hurt you without letting it affect your care? Paused, then nodded. I can learn. Emma smiled. Then grab a medical bag, we have patients to see. Months passed. Archon Station thrived under free governance. The Empire never launched a full-scale attack. They were too busy dealing with resistance movements across their territory. The story of the gentle hands had inspired too many people. Emma continued her work, training new healers, treating patients, building something lasting. She declined positions of leadership. She wasn't interested in politics or fame. She just wanted to heal. But she understood that she had become something more than a medic. She was a symbol, a reminder that power comes in many forms, that gentleness can be a choice made from strength, not an admission of weakness. One evening, Emma sat in the observation deck looking at the stars. Joined her, sitting silently for a while. Do you ever regret it? He asked finally. What? All of this, you could have just treated patients quietly, stayed invisible, stayed safe. Emma thought about that. She looked at her hands, turning them in the light. The scars, the calluses, the gentle hands that had changed everything. No, she said. I don't regret it. Someone had to show them. Someone had to prove that you can't judge strength by size or appearance, that the kindest hands can also be the most dangerous when defending what matters. And what matters? Freedom, dignity, the right to exist without fear, Emma smiled. The right to be gentle without being called weak. Nodded, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the gentle hands movement was growing. Other stations were organizing. Other oppressed people were finding courage. The Empire's days of unchallenged rule were ending. And it all started with one human woman who refused to accept that gentle meant powerless. Emma's hands had healed thousands, saved countless lives, toppled a throne, and built something beautiful from the ashes of tyranny. She looked at those hands one more time, calloused, gentle, and strong, always strong. Because she chose to be. Because evolution had given her the tools to survive anything. And because when pushed, she had shown the galaxy what those tools could do. The throne was broken, the empire was crumbling, and gentle hands were building a better future. One patient at a time. One freed station at a time. One act of courage at a time. Emma Carson, medic from Earth, had changed the galaxy with her gentle hands. And she wasn't done yet. Word was already spreading beyond the station. Ships that had docked earlier were leaving, carrying the news. A human woman with gentle hands had toppled Overlord. The servants, the weak ones, had seized one of the Empire's major stations without massive bloodshed. The galaxy would hear this story, and the Empire would never look at humans the same way again. Emma knelt beside one last time. "You'll stand trial," she told him. "You'll answer for every cruelty, every death, every act of oppression, and you'll do it knowing that you were defeated not by weapons or armies, but by the soft hands you mocked." She stood and walked away, leaving the Overlord paralyzed on the floor beside his fallen throne. The gentle hands had won. She looked at those hands in the darkness, calloused, gentle, but not weak, never weak. In 1 week, she would show them the difference. He needed access, trust, proximity. And he had done it because he thought her hands were too gentle to be dangerous. He would learn, they would all learn. 3 weeks. She had healer's hands and a healer's heart. But she also had something they couldn't see. She had survived Earth. She had the patience of someone who spent years learning to save lives, and now she had purpose. "I can be ready," he said. Emma stood, her wrist still ached. Her hands still looked soft and gentle in the dim light. But she felt different now, had made a mistake today. He had shown her exactly what he thought of her, of all humans. He had underestimated them. That would be his downfall. She looked at one last time. 3 weeks, she said. Then we show them what these soft hands can do.